Word tropical. Description describes regions or climates characterized by high temperatures and humidity. It relates to areas near the equator, often featuring lush vegetation and unique wildlife. It's used to depict weather, plants, animals, or landscapes typical of these warm zones. Phrases of example. First, the air was thick with the scent of tropical flowers, intoxicating and sweet. Second, a tropical storm had passed, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Third, the tropical sun beat down mercilessly, baking the landscape to a crisp. Word tail. Description refers to the appendage at the rear of an animal used for balance and communication. It can also refer to a trailing part of something, like a parade or a vehicle. It's a common word used to describe a physical feature or a following element. Phrases of example. First, the dog wagged its tail excitedly, chasing butterflies in the meadow. Second, he could feel the cold wind whipping at his tailcoat. Third, the lion's tail lashed back and forth in agitation. Word charter. Description refers to an official document granting rights or defining a company's purpose. It can also mean to rent a vehicle, typically a bus or boat, for exclusive use. It indicates a formal agreement or the right to utilize something. Phrases of example. First, the Charter of Liberty is not to restrain men, but to free them. Second, it's a charter for the exploitation of the planet. It's a license to pillage. Third, the town's charter was the foundation of its existence. Word romantic. Description describes something related to love or a feeling of love. It can refer to a person who is loving or affectionate, or to a situation, activity, or place that evokes feelings of love and tenderness. Phrases of example. First, it was a romantic idea, but it wouldn't work. Second, he saw the world as a romantic wilderness. Third, she had a romantic vision of the future. Word sex. Description refers to biological activity relating to reproduction or sexual desire. It can also describe relationships involving intimacy and physical contact. Use with sensitivity, respecting social and cultural contexts. Phrases of example. First, she felt the heat of his sex against hers. Second, sex is all right, but it isn't everything. Third, sex is a language, in its own way. Word snake. Description, a long, legless reptile, often found in warm climates. It is a type of animal that slithers and can be dangerous if it bites. It's a common creature in nature, often appearing in stories and myths. Phrases of example. First, he saw a snake sleeping in the sun. Second, the snake slithered away into the grass. Third, and the snake says, "Go away." Word forget. Description means to be unable to remember something. It describes the loss of memory regarding a fact, event, or person. It's a common verb used to express a lapse in memory or inability to recall information. Phrases of example. First, I shall never forget you, my dear. Second, we forget so many things. Third, I try not to forget the small things. Word burn. Description means to be damaged or destroyed by fire or intense heat. It can also refer to a strong feeling of emotion, like embarrassment or anger. It describes the process of something being consumed by flames or experiencing intense heat. Phrases of example. First, he burned so brightly, he extinguished himself. Second, a small fire started, then it began to burn quickly. Third, the paper began to burn, and the room filled with smoke. Word star. Description, a very bright point of light in the sky, often appearing at night. It can also refer to a famous person, like an actor or singer. It's a common word used to describe something shining or a celebrity. Phrases of example. First, I looked up at the stars and thought, what if I'm not supposed to be here? Second, the stars are the only things that never lie. Third, the stars are always there, even when we can't see them. Word left. Description means remaining on the opposite side from a particular direction or reference point. It describes something positioned or located to the left when facing forward. It's often used to describe physical position or direction. Phrases of example. First, she felt left behind by the rapid pace of change. Second, the boy was left standing alone in the empty street. Third, he left a lasting impression on everyone who knew him. Word distress. Description denotes a state of severe anxiety, suffering, or pain. It represents a significant emotional or physical hardship, often involving feelings of helplessness and urgency. It highlights a situation requiring immediate attention or relief. Phrases of example. First, the human heart is the deepest distress. Second, his distress was a palpable thing. Third, she bore her distress with quiet dignity. Word cliff. Description, a steep rock face or high landmass, typically ending abruptly over a body of water or a lower area. It signifies a significant drop and often evokes imagery of dramatic landscapes or perilous situations. Phrases of example. First, the wind howled over the cliff edge, a lonely sound. Second, he stood on the cliff, contemplating the turbulent sea below. Third, the path led precariously to the cliff, offering breathtaking views. Word corporation. Description, a large company or group of companies united to act as a single economic unit. It's often involved in industry or commerce and legally recognized as an entity separate from its owners. It signifies a formal business structure. Phrases of example. First, the corporation is a powerful entity, often manipulating events for profit. Second, big corporations control everything in this country. Third, a corporation is not a person, and it should not have the same rights. Word ask. Description, to inquire about something or request something from someone. It means to pose a question or make a request. It's a common verb used to get information or to request a favor. Phrases of example. First, she would not ask for help, for she was a woman of great pride. Second, all I can do is ask the world to be a better place, but it will not listen to me. Third, he was about to ask her a question, but he knew he could not, for the answer would break his heart. Word compete. Description means to try to win against someone in a contest or situation. It describes a rivalry or effort to be better than others. It's often used in sports, exams, or job applications to show you're striving for success. Phrases of example. First, they compete for the attention of the crowd. Second, we compete, therefore we are. Third, we compete not with each other, but with the forces of nature. Word definitely. Description means without a doubt or question. It expresses certainty and conviction about something. Use it to show that you are sure about a fact or an opinion and leave no room for doubt. Phrases of example. First, I definitely don't want to be a part of it. Second, I definitely think we should go. Third, you are definitely one of us now. Word observer. Description, a person who watches something happening, often in a detached or neutral way. It describes someone who notices and records events without actively participating, often used in scientific or investigative contexts. Phrases of example. First, he was a silent observer of the world, a watcher of human folly. Second, the observer is always the observed. Third, he was an impartial observer, recording the events with detached precision. Word fourth. Description means to move or extend in a specified direction. It often suggests a progression or continuation, indicating something is brought out or presented. It is used in more formal writing or speeches, and often with verbs of expression. Phrases of example. First, he stepped forth to confront his destiny, unwavering. Second, she strode forth, a beacon of defiance. Third, he went forth to fight, a warrior bold. Word sweep. Description means to move swiftly and widely, often to gather or clear something. It can refer to a physical movement like cleaning a floor or a more abstract movement, such as a wave of emotion or influence spreading rapidly. Phrases of example. First, she swept the dust from the table, a daily ritual of quiet defiance. Second, the storm swept across the plains, erasing all trace of the village. Third, the investigation would sweep up many innocent people, caught in the tide of suspicion. Word, specialized. Description, describes something designed or adapted for a specific purpose or function. It signifies a focus on a particular area of expertise, skill, or product, often requiring advanced knowledge or training. It highlights a narrow, focused application. Phrases of example. First, he had specialized in the study of obscure dialects. Second, her knowledge was specialized, deeply rooted in the history of textiles. Third, the team specialized in forensic linguistics, tracing language patterns. Word, indicator. Description, a thing that suggests or warns of future events or trends. It signals a condition or situation, often used in data analysis or to represent a trend. It suggests a sign, clue, or measurement revealing something about a larger system. Phrases of example. First, the dashboard's indicator blinked a warning, unsettling her. Second, he used the economic indicator to predict the market's future. Third, the environmental indicator showed a steady decline in air quality. Word, Eastern. Description, describes something situated in or relating to the east. It indicates direction, location, or origin, often referring to geographic areas, winds, or cultural aspects associated with the east. Phrases of example. First, the eastern sky was just beginning to lighten. Second, he gazed eastward, towards the rising sun. Third, the eastern lands held many secrets and dangers. Word, principle. Description, a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior. It represents a guiding rule or standard, often relating to ethics, law, or scientific reasoning. It is a core belief. Phrases of example. First, the first principle is that you must not lie. Second, a man's character is his fate, and a man's principles are his compass. Third, the principle of equality requires that we treat all people with respect. Word, smooth. Description, describes a surface or object that is even and without bumps or irregularities. It can also refer to something that is easy or flowing, like a process or conversation. It suggests a lack of roughness or difficulty. Phrases of example. First, the water was smooth as glass, reflecting the moon above. Second, he smoothed the wrinkles from his coat, a nervous habit. Third, her voice was smooth and low, a calming presence. Word, basketball. Description, refers to a popular sport played by two teams using a ball and hoop. It describes the game itself, the ball used, or the equipment involved. Often used when talking about sports, games, or physical activities. Phrases of example. First, I felt a sudden need to be a basketball player. Second, he was a man who lived his life like a basketball. Third, the whole world was a basketball game. Word, revenge. Description, denotes the act of inflicting harm or payback on someone who has wronged you. It implies a desire to balance the scales of justice, often fueled by anger or a feeling of being unfairly treated. It suggests a retaliatory action. Phrases of example. First, I will have my revenge on the men who wronged me. Second, revenge is a dish best served cold. Third, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Word, casino. Description, a public place where people can gamble, such as playing games of chance like roulette or poker. It's often associated with entertainment and leisure, and suggests a formal or luxurious setting for gambling activities. Phrases of example. First, the casino felt like a fever dream. Second, he's gone to the casino, naturally, chasing after that ephemeral thrill. Third, the glittering casino, a stage for dreams and illusions, swallowed them whole. Word, practice. Description, means to do something repeatedly to become better at it. It involves regularly doing an activity to improve your skill or knowledge, often used with nouns like music or sport to describe repeated action. Phrases of example. First, I must practice my French every day. Second, they must practice their lines for the play. Third, to be a master, one must practice a great deal. Word, busy. Description, means engaged in activity or occupied, having a lot to do. It can describe a person who is working or someone who is preoccupied. It can also describe a place that is full of people or activity. Phrases of example. First, I was busy with my studies, so I couldn't come. Second, he was busy counting his money. Third, she was busy thinking about the future. Word, kilometre. Description, a unit of distance. It's equal to about half a mile. It's commonly used to measure long distances, like the length of a road or the distance between cities. It's a useful word for talking about travel. Phrases of example. First, the town was a kilometre away, so we walked. Second, he drove a kilometre or two before he stopped. Third, it was 5 kilometers away. I had to walk. Word, erupt. Description, means to suddenly and violently break out, often referring to volcanoes or emotions. It describes a forceful and often unexpected outburst or release of pent-up energy or feelings. It can also refer to a sudden, violent outbreak. Phrases of example. First, the volcano threatened to erupt at any moment. Second, his temper would erupt when faced with criticism. Third, a storm of anger erupted within her. Word, classroom. Description, a room where students go to learn. It's a place for lessons and studying, typically found in schools or universities. It's where a teacher leads a class. Phrases of example. First, the classroom was a refuge, a place where stories came alive. Second, I looked around the classroom, a sea of unfamiliar faces. Third, the teacher stood at the front of the classroom, ready to impart wisdom. Word, compassion. Description, compassion signifies a deep awareness of another's suffering, coupled with a desire to alleviate it. It goes beyond sympathy, involving empathy and a willingness to act kindly. It describes a feeling of concern and care for others experiencing hardship. Phrases of example. First, compassion is the greatest virtue of a man. Second, she felt a wave of compassion for the struggling artist. Third, compassion, the tenderest of all virtues, has no place in this brutal world. Word, singing. Description, refers to the action of producing musical sounds with your voice. It's the act of creating melody through vocalization. It can describe a performance or simply the activity of making sounds. Phrases of example. First, and then I heard singing, and it was a voice of such joy that I wept. Second, the night was full of singing, and the air was sweet with the scent of jasmine. Third, the sound of her singing was like a balm to his weary soul. Word, number. Description, means to count or assign a numerical value to something. It can refer to calculating quantities or to give something a designation, like a phone number or a room number. It's a basic action of determining quantity. Phrases of example. First, the number of nights I spent thinking of you was countless. Second, I'm not sure what number I am, but I am a number. Third, they numbered more than 1,000, and they were ready to fight. Word, litter. Description, refers to scattered rubbish or debris lying in a public place. It can also describe a group of young animals born at the same time. It's used when describing untidiness or referring to a group of offspring. Phrases of example. First, the refuse and litter of civilization marred the beauty of the wood. Second, the streets were a litter of discarded dreams and broken promises. Third, she collected the litter from the beach, a small act of rebellion against indifference. Word, invest. Description, means to dedicate money, time, or effort with the expectation of a future benefit or return. It implies putting resources into something with the hope of growth, improvement, or a positive outcome. Phrases of example. First, we must invest in the youth, for they are the leaders of tomorrow. Second, I will invest my time and resources in this venture. Third, she decided to invest her emotions in a stable relationship. Word, simple. Description, means easy to understand or do, not complicated. It describes something that requires little effort or skill. It can refer to ideas, tasks, or objects that are straightforward and uncomplicated. Phrases of example. First, it's a simple life, but it's mine. Second, the simplest answer is usually the right one. Third, keep things simple. Word, fan. Description, a person who enthusiastically supports a person, team, or thing. It indicates strong admiration and support, often involving excitement and loyalty. It's commonly used in contexts like sports, music, or entertainment. Phrases of example. First, he was a great fan of the detective stories. Second, she was a dedicated fan of the team, never missing a game. Third, the old woman was a fan of opera and attended every performance. Word, continue. Description, means to keep doing something or to carry on with an activity. It indicates that an action or process doesn't stop, but keeps happening over time. It can also mean to proceed or remain in a certain state. Phrases of example. First, I will continue to fight until I die. Second, continue to believe in the power of hope. Third, we must continue the fight for freedom. Word, unfold. Description, means to develop or reveal itself gradually. It describes a process of becoming known or apparent over time, like a story revealing its details or a situation evolving. It implies a slow and progressive revelation. Phrases of example. First, the secrets of the universe began to unfold before her eyes. Second, the plot would unfold with surprising twists and turns. Third, let the events unfold as they may. I will remain steadfast. Word, translate. Description, means to change something from one language into another. It involves converting written or spoken words, phrases, or texts to convey the original meaning in a different language. It's used when bridging language barriers. Phrases of example. First, I can translate the language of the flowers. Second, let me translate that into something you can understand. Third, he tried to translate her silence into words. Word, emotion. Description, a feeling such as joy, sadness, anger, or fear. It describes a subjective state of feeling and can be expressed through behavior or physical sensations. It is used to describe feelings and reactions to situations. Phrases of example. First, he felt a wave of emotion crash over him. Second, I was consumed by emotion, and I didn't know what to do. Third, she struggled to control her emotion, but it was too much. Word, lead. Description, refers to the person or thing that guides or shows the way. It can also mean a position of importance or influence. It is used when discussing direction, guidance, or a role of authority. Phrases of example. First, follow your bliss and you'll find your way. Second, a good leader can change a failure into a success. Third, the journey has its own logic. The lead is given not by your goals, but by the way. Word, hair. Description, refers to the strands of protein that grow from your head. It's what covers the top of your head and comes in various colors and textures. It's a common feature of the human body. Phrases of example. First, she had long, flowing hair, the color of spun gold. Second, he brushed his hair back with a nervous hand. Third, his hair was gray, but his eyes still sparkled with life. Word, strip. Description, refers to a long, narrow area of land alongside a river or the edge of a road. It can also describe a place where people remove clothing or a layer of something removed, like bark from a tree. The word has multiple meanings depending on the context. Phrases of example. First, the strip of land between the river and the cliff was all that remained. Second, the strip mining had ravaged the landscape, leaving scars that would never heal. Third, a single strip of faded wallpaper clung to the wall, a ghost of a former life. Word, transparent. Description describes something allowing you to see through it clearly, both literally and figuratively. It can refer to physical clarity or, metaphorically, openness and honesty in communication or intentions. It implies a lack of hidden agendas. Phrases of example. First, the air was transparent, almost painfully so, reflecting the sky's desolate clarity. Second, her motives were transparent, and I found them surprisingly simple. Third, the lake was transparent, revealing depths I'm not sure I wanted to see. Word, cook. Description refers to a person whose job is to prepare food. It can also describe someone skilled in cooking. It's commonly used to talk about chefs or people who enjoy and are good at preparing meals. Phrases of example. First, she was a good cook, and she knew how to make a meal out of nothing. Second, he was a cook by trade, but a dreamer by nature. Third, a good cook is a necessity. Word, cool. Description means to allow something to become colder, often by letting it sit. It can also refer to making an environment less warm. The action usually involves a decrease in temperature, either naturally or through intervention. Phrases of example. First, he could cool himself with a beer in the evening. Second, the breeze was cool against his feverish skin. Third, let me cool down a little before I go in. Word, incentive. Description, a reason or motivation to do something. It's a reward or benefit offered to encourage a specific action or behavior. Incentives can be financial, recognition-based, or anything that prompts a desired outcome. Phrases of example. First, the incentive to create is something inherent in human nature. Second, a powerful incentive is the fear of failure. Third, there was no external incentive to continue the struggle.